have all heard the phrase, click it or ticket, numerous times. Like most other commercials, we tend to zone out when this particular commercial is played on the radio. Is it really that important that we wear a seatbelt? It is obviously important to someone, otherwise it would not be played on the radio so often. Why is wearing a seatbelt important to everyday people like us? Hopefully, by the end of this speech, you will start wearing a seatbelt more often, and if you already do, then you will be encouraged to persuade others to do the same. I take wearing a seatbelt very seriously because I personally knew people that were killed in car accidents because they were not wearing their seatbelts. To begin, I will share and explain with you many negative side effects that will occur when a safety belt is not present. Then I will educate you on the beneficial qualities that can come from wearing a seatbelt and encouraging those around you to do as well. First of all, when the safety of a seatbelt is absent, many negative side effects may occur. According to Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 21,022 people were killed in car accidents in 2014, and over half of them were not wearing their seatbelts. This statistic is very real for my family. My uncle was in a really bad car accident when he was only 18 years old. He was driving in the country and came to an intersection where he had the right-of-way. Another car was present at that intersection. However, the driver did not see him, so they ran right into him. Unfortunately, my uncle was not wearing a seatbelt, so he was ejected from the car. His head hit the windshield on the way out and shattered the glass. The ambulance tried to rush him to the nearest hospital, but because he suffered too much brain damage, he died on the way there. If my uncle had been wearing a seatbelt that day, chances are he would most likely be alive today. This tragic story can be the reality of anyone in this room if they choose to not wear a seatbelt. You might think you can depend on your airbag to protect you. However, it cannot properly work if the safety buckle is not in. An airbag alone can only do so much to protect a person. The combination of an airbag plus a lap and shoulder belt reduces the risk of death by 51%, and this was stated by Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, Highway Loss Data Institute. Rather than protect a person, airbags are more likely to harm a person in an accident if they are not wearing their seatbelt, or even if they are wearing a seatbelt in the improper position. It is for these negative side effects that we must reconsider our seatbelt wearing habits. Now I will educate you on how wearing a seatbelt and encouraging people around you to do as well can bring a tremendous amount of positive outcomes. People will greatly reduce their chances of being killed in a car accident if they simply wear their seatbelt. AAA reported that seatbelts are the single most effective means of reducing the risk of death in a car accident and saved nearly 30,000 lives since 1975 in the U.S. alone. People will reduce injuries sustained in a car accident by wearing a seatbelt. Seatbelts reduce the chances of death and injury by keeping the person inside of the car, and they keep the person securely in their seat. A seatbelt should be worn any time a person is driving in a car, no matter how far or short the distance is. Progressive, one of the largest auto insurance companies in the country, discovered in a recent survey that 52% of reported crashes occurred 5 miles or less from a home, and 77% occurred 15 miles or less from the home. I propose that this is because people assume, since they simply travel a short distance, a seatbelt is not necessary. These statistics, however, make it very apparent that a seatbelt is always necessary. First, I shared with you the many negative side effects that occur because a seatbelt was not worn. Then I educated you on what positive outcomes can come from wearing a seatbelt. After hearing this speech, why would you not wear a seatbelt? Seatbelts really do save lives. If you care about your life and your family, you should take 5 seconds to fasten your seatbelt and encourage those around you to do as well. According to Edgar Snyder and Associates, a personal injury law firm, children are likely to be buckled 92% of the time when adults in the car use a seatbelt, as opposed to 72% of the time when adults are not using them. We are all old enough in this room to know that seatbelts are important and need to be worn, and we need to be setting a good example for those who are present in our vehicles.
Good organization, yeah. Heard those transitions between, knew where she was. What else? Yeah, I thought the intro was perfect by the book. We had a good attention gaining technique, credibility came out, preview was clear what the purpose of the speech was. Any advice for Elizabeth?
As far as like the visual aid goes, I thought it might be cool if instead of, well, maybe in addition to showing, like she showed a lot of logos of who she was talking about, but if she would have put the like stats of what she was talking about, because most of the time it was, or when it was like so and so says that this many people do this, if she would have put the numbers up there, I think it would have been like added to the PowerPoint.
So we had a lot of symbols of what you were talking about, which is fine, but remember a visual aid should also aid understanding. So I would agree, like the data is coming at us, see if you can put some of that data in graph form and make it a little bit easier to digest. I think that could be helpful. Anything else?
I've actually heard a few stories of people who didn't wear their seatbelts and it actually saved their life. And so like that's not really, I guess, relevant to what your speech was like going for. But I think it would have been interesting to hear like for people who, I mean, I'm not saying you should wear your seatbelt because you should, but just to acknowledge that and just be like, this is why you should, even though that has happened.
Like explain that that's like an outlier, like rarely happens.
I was thinking some things similar because you do kind of address the reasons why people might not. And one reason might be that they bought into that. Like my grandpa has bought into that. He never wears a seatbelt because he read one story on Fox News about how you could die if you were. Anyway, so he for people like that or for that myth, you might want to knock down that barrier in the cause section. But one more thing. Oh, okay, so this is a big one. Remember when we were talking about good persuasion having to do three things? We have to establish the need, we have to propose a plan, and we have to show that that plan works. I think Elizabeth did number 2 and number 3 really, really well. Number 1, she definitely showed that people who don't wear their seatbelts are more likely to die. But what's one more thing she could do to establish the need of this speech in this room with this audience?
Show a gruesome picture.
Show some gruesome pictures?
Yeah.
Austin.
Ask surveys, how many people come with their seatbelt.
Yeah, we need to know if we are a part of the problem before we can be a part of the solution, right? And so even just doing a short survey that finds out how many of you wear your seatbelt 100% of the time. If you are not in that 100%, then this speech is for you because you've proven that even short distances, something bad can happen. So make us feel like we are a part of the problem so that we can solve the problem. Really good stuff. Good job, Elizabeth. Moving on.
Wait.
What one question?
The no-show or AD mute, it has a little tiny red dot by it.
Oh, yes. Okay. Are you ready?